40, and I'm here with a quick video today to address release and stretching of tight hip flexors. I've had a few inquiries about strategies for dealing with some ongoing low back pain. Now, these particular clients have had some kind of diagnostic treatment. There isn't a structural issue. What they do all have in common is the fact that they're actually quite sedentary in their jobs and they're all spending hours every day sitting. So let's have a look at some ideas, some stretches and some releases for getting into the hip flexors and into the quads to see if we can reduce some of that ongoing dull ache that they're experiencing in their lower back. The simplest way to have a look at reducing some tightness in the hips is to have a look at the really basic quad stretch. The really basic quad stretch is probably performed as the worst stretch in the industry that I've seen in my 16 years plus. I have a look around at gyms as I sort of go around sticky beaking at people's classes and having fun, and I look at it and I just think, what do you think you're doing? So let's have a look at the basics of this basic stretch. There could be some ideas that you're not doing at the moment that you could possibly address, and let's have a look. Especially if you are sitting for a long time, if you're a runner, doing that kind of very demanding, repetitive work on your hips. Quad stretch. Let's hold on for a start. It's more important that you get effective stretch than you have the ego of, look at this, I can do my stretch and balance on one leg. Good for you. But let's have a look at the targeting of the quad and the hip. We're going to just grab the foot first off, and this is what you'll typically see as you go around. You may well do it yourself. We're going to tuck into one hip, we're going to grab the toes, and we're going to bend the leg, and we are supposed to magically stretch our quad. Okay, so let's revise that just a little. Slide the hand down to the front of the ankle and stand up straight. We're going to get that knee and draw it right in alongside the other knee of the supporting leg. We want to bring the knee back slightly behind centre line, stand up really straight and square up the hips. Simple adjustments and you will immediately feel your quad and your hip flexor. Stand up really tall, pull that arm back, open up through the head of the hip flexor as well, and this stretch becomes a horse of a different colour. Simple adjustments there, but you're actually hitting the quad and you'll feel it substantially differently if you've been doing a sort of bent leg kind of arrangement before. So we're going to square the hips, we're going to make sure that the knees are alongside each other, and we're going to bring the leg of the bent leg back behind to really make a strong stretch through the front of the thigh. Now, for a lot of people who are experiencing lower back pain, the very action of bending over, picking up the ankle and pulling it back can often lead to a spasm or some further back pain. So we want to avoid that. Also, if you have very arthritic knees, perhaps you're not really comfortable getting into that position, let's look at a modification. So using the bench, we're going to tuck the foot back. Once again, we're going to check that the hips are square. We don't want to get into any kind of compensatory movement patterns by dropping through the pelvis. So keep it nice and square. Foot comes back and we're going to tuck the hips under slightly. The hip flexor, the iliopsoas, the other hip flexor, comes from the lumbar spine through the pelvis into the groin. And sitting for a long time, those hip flexors get very shortened and tight and actually tip the tilt of your pelvis. So we're going to counter that movement by tucking under slightly, which opens the hip flexor, and then squeezing through the glute, which demands the hip flexor, the opposing muscle group, to start to open a little bit. Let's release that. Repeat, squeeze, release, repeat and squeeze. I'm not a huge fan of holding stretches just for 20 to 30 seconds. I really like the stretch, release, stretch. I find that the muscle is much happier to release and it's a much more comfortable way to approach your stretching. 2 simple approaches to the quad stretch, just some little refinements. Let's have a look at foam rolling and how that can possibly help. So I've got my trusty foam roller here, one of my favourite toys to have come out in the last few years. Really good for releasing through your quads, through your back, through your glutes, anywhere else that you have the mobility and dexterity to get in and work. But we're just going to have a look at releasing hip flexors and doing a release for the front of the quads for now. So come down, just position the foam roller in front of you. Come down into roughly an elbow plank position. So get nice and comfortable. Just going to allow the feet to come up off the floor. And at the moment this foam roller is centered right in the middle of my thighs, right into the belly of the muscle. So just a very, very small movement. We roll to and fro. Now if you're really tight in your quads, you may well find that this stings. It's not painful so much, it's stingy. So stick with it because you'll allow at least 10 to 15 seconds for that release to happen. We're going to persist and then we're going to roll forward a little bit, not onto the kneecap, but onto the tendons above, which in turn can be quite uncomfortable. Persevere. So as we roll through that movement, we're also going to come to a position where the foam roller sits below the hip bones and just above the pubic bone. And as you roll to and fro, we work that release right into the top of the hip flexor. That gets a little uncomfortable, come out, come back to the middle of the quads. You can actually turn your toes right out and roll to get a little bit of the inner thigh muscles as well. And that's another joy and delight all on its own. It's a worthwhile investment because you'll get a lot of value out of it. So a couple of different options there. You've got your quad stretches, you've got your foam rolling. I tend to spend at least 2 minutes on any one area, just alternating, say, hip flexors to quads and then back up again. And I do that daily. I should probably spend a little bit more time than I actually am at the moment, but a really worthwhile investment because you get a lot of value out of it, especially as we address how to foam roll into your spine at another time. So for more hints, tips, nutrition, fitness, or perhaps stretching options as well, go to femalefatloss over40.com and we look forward to seeing you on the blog.